for the mainstream of America, they're aware of Russia's war. They're on Ukraine's side. They're not sure of the day-to-day developments. And anyway, Trump says bad things about Zelensky and then Putin, so they're not sure who to believe and all this stuff. So they get confused. Ukraine just doesn't come up. I have to bring it up. They just have kind of like moved on in the debate to other things because they're also worried about what's going on in the economy and their social security and their health care and housing costs and all this stuff. And so Ukraine is just one more thing to juggle for them. So I think it's a combination of things. And I think people don't see an end. And all the polls show that Americans generally do support Ukraine, but that takes leadership at the top. Flags that were there in 2022, yes, they're gone. You know that's been written about. And what can you do? Tell people, well, you guys, the war's still going on, so you should. No. They've had it. I mean, tell me when it's over. Kind of like that.
Okay, so welcome to Talking Ukraine in English, episode number 19 with Brian Bonner. Brian is the former chief editor of the Kyiv Post from 2008 to 2021, and he's currently a writer at The Cipher, and still calling Kyiv home, although currently Brian's in the States. And I'm really excited to talk to him about his time and experiences in Ukraine at the Kyiv Post and also his perception of take on current events regarding Ukraine and the U.S. administration and what's going on today. Maybe, Brian, you can give us a little bit more of your bio that I probably missed something there.
No, you have it. You have it right. I'm now working for the Cipher Brief, but sometimes writing, but mostly putting together their daily newsletter. It's a website, national security website for intelligence professionals, defense professionals. So it's pretty good. I like to stay involved in international geopolitics, and then before that, I was after the Kyiv Post, I was at Geopolitical Intelligence Services, which also involved editing a lot of stuff. So in the international realm, but I do still live in Ukraine. I definitely do miss my position at the Kyiv Post and all my colleagues, but they're doing well and exhausting themselves covering the war.
Yeah, I bet part of you sort of misses, I guess, doing that. Like
nothing like being in a newsroom, but it was a very sad ending. The major part of the team went to started the Kyiv Independent, and then the Kyiv Post completely, relaunched. And the owner who mistakenly fired all of us died last October, Adnan Kivan, sadly. So it was not a good situation all around. But, a lot of great journalism is being done by Ukrainian journalists in many outlets covering this war, which has got to be terribly exhausting. Because, I was there at the Kyiv Post from the beginning of you could argue that Russia's been at war for centuries against Ukraine, and that's true. But we were also there from the revolution, from the start of the war in 2014.
Yeah, and the Kyiv Independent, that's, I guess, relatively new, and that is the former Kyiv Post team that worked with you, correct? And why didn't you sort of segue over that way with the rest of them?
Well, I felt like it was a good time to get out. But prematurely, it was not in retrospect. I didn't realize that the full-scale invasion, there were signs all throughout 2021 that the full-scale invasion was going to happen. It was a surprise, but I felt like I was attached to the Kyiv Post brand. I didn't want to do a new startup. And I know it was tough, but once the full-scale invasion happened, of course, the uh, interest in what's happening in Ukraine just multiplied, not only for the Kyiv Independent, but also for the Kyiv Post, Noye Vremya, Ukrainska Pravda, all the other outlets who did also expand into English. And so, uh, we that in that sense, we've had the best coverage of Ukraine that we've had in my lifetime, in the sense of the number of journalists from different organizations here.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting maybe take on things because when the Kyiv Post, when you were running the Kyiv Post, it was really like the only English language sort of in-depth regular coverage of Ukraine.
We were pretty much at the monopoly, and there wasn't a lot of interest. I mean, well, not. There's always a core interest of people, and most of our readers, of course, are North American, Canadian, and that hasn't changed. But in terms of the volume of readership and interest, it would peak during revolution, during war, during Trump's impeachment, during specific events, but then it would go down because most people in the world, even English speaking people, Ukraine is not always the number one on their radar. And that's what we're seeing now again in the fourth year. I mean, I've been in America since the beginning of May, and it's like you'd think Sean Diddy Combs is the only story that is being covered. I mean, you would not know. You can look for it and find it, but just nobody's talking about, oh, Ukraine was hit the third time in 3 nights, 3 consecutive nights.
Yeah, I noticed that because I was seeing that obviously what's going on in Ukraine just through friends and social media, but then I was looking at New York Times, Washington Post, and no one was really mentioning these huge drone attacks that had happened in Ukraine in the last couple of days. I mean, why do you think that is? Is it just not engaging views and readership because it's more of the same story?
I think people see it as an endless war, and I think Trump has reframed it as not our business. They're both bad. Zelensky's bad and Putin's bad, and so I think it's a combination of things. And I think people don't see an end, and all the polls show that Americans generally do support Ukraine, but that takes leadership at the top. I mean, the Senate, Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal have, I don't know what they're waiting on. I mean, Graham is talking about bone-crushing sanctions, and that certainly can be done. You know, Sunday, this is even after the second one, only the second night in a row that Ukraine has been bombarded. Trump came out finally and said Putin is absolutely crazy. But again, he says he's only considering sanctions. And Ukraine is desperately running out of air defenses, because the scary thing about the weekend bombardment, the Memorial Day bombardment, is that they were not able to intercept any of the 9 ballistic missiles that came Ukraine's way. So this is highlighting a huge vulnerability. So I mean, we really have to. I mean, the steps are clear. Trump is not seems afraid of Putin, and afraid to confront Putin, and afraid to decisively, still take a moral stance in this whole thing. And I call attention to your over the weekend in the London Telegraph, Fiona Hill, who was his national security advisor for Russia in the first term, explains in great detail during an interview that she says Trump is terrified of Putin and the nuclear weapons, and just does not want to confront Putin. So as long as America is in that position, it's really only going to be the Ukrainians and the Europeans who are going to be able to decisively, prevail in this war.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of talk, and there has been a lot of talk from Trump and from other Republicans about possible sanctions and this and that. And I'm always like, well, look at what are the actions? There have been no actions. And I just wrote this, on my Facebook. I thought maybe I'd read it to you and just get your reaction to it. This is about his Trump's post. Putin has gone crazy. He doesn't know what happened. I don't know what happened. He's needlessly killing people. I wrote, you don't know what happened. Putin is obviously doing what he has been doing since deciding to launch an invasion of Ukraine, not just for the last 3 years, but since 2014. And that is murdering and terrorizing Ukrainians simply because they exist and refuse to bow to him. How can someone be this naive and disconnected from reality? I don't believe Trump actually is that naive. It has been clear for years Trump hates Ukraine and loves Putin and has business interests intertwined with Russia in some capacity. He's now just playing the part Russia needs him to play. He's stringing everyone along by saying vague stuff that drags out the discussion in the public space into muddy waters. This is Russia's tactic to give more time to drain Ukraine's resources, knowing that the USA won't replenish them. For some reason, people keep believing in some secret silver lining, but there is and has never been one. Look at his actions, not words. The sooner the media and European leadership accept that this is all just theater, the sooner we can move on and deal with the reality that the US president is beholden to Russia.
Exactly. Agree 100%. And I will add that, I mean, look at after he called him absolutely crazy, what did Putin do? He blasted Ukraine again overnight, early this morning, with another deadly barrage. I think the record number of drones, 355. So we keep breaking these records. And it's very scary right now because, as I think The Economist points out, they used to be able, 25 drone attack was a big thing a while ago, but now we're talking hundreds nightly. This is a really scary situation. No, he's willfully. I agree with you. He knows better. He's willfully playing the part, because he's the last one who understands what's really happening. I think he understands. He just doesn't want to understand. And there was a part, when he ambushed the South African president in the White House. A piece of that didn't get as much coverage was he said Russia was stupidly kicked out of the G8, and if they had been in the G8, maybe they wouldn't have started the war. Well, they got kicked out because they did start the war in 2014. Certainly, he must know that, or else we have a very stupid, naive president. And either way, it's very dangerous for America. It's going to be his presidency, if it continues like this, is going to be very, very dangerous for Ukraine, but also for America and for Europe. And what does he do after this? He starts a fight with Europe over tariffs. So he's attacking allies again, or historic allies. And Europe, at the same time, is trying to be the only one, and they have their own divisions, the only one who's really, stepping up for Ukraine. And as you know very well, it's not enough. Europe is just depended too long on America and spent too little on defense. And so they're trying to take care of their own defense and Ukraine's defense. And that's where we are, unfortunately.
Yeah, it still seems like slow going from Europe's point of view. There's like talk, like the right talk, it seems like, but like actually that talk translating into action, it's sort of like they're still dragging their asses.
But things are not as bad as they. I mean, thank God the Romanian election turned the right way. The former foreign minister Dumitru Kuleba, who did a great job, talks about strategic encirclement because Poland and Ukraine have difficult history, but basically all political parties in Poland are with Ukraine. We don't. Czech Republic is like one election away from softening its support. Slovakia with Fico remains difficult. Hungary remains difficult, and if we had lost Romania, that would have been trouble. Now Turkey, we have to hand it to Erdogan for always standing up for Ukraine's territorial integrity, but he plays his own game too, as you know, and he does deals with Russia, and he's all about Erdogan and Turkey, and not necessarily about Ukraine or doing what's right here. So we're in a difficult situation, But you talk about exhaustion, and Ukrainians are also the same way. You understand we've lost. You're in Germany. You understand we've lost 8 million people, 7, 8 million people from the country. And I'm most of my friends, because I've lived so long in Ukraine, are Ukrainian, and most of those are living abroad. And most of those, I don't see themselves coming back. I mean, over the weekend, I just lost another friend who lived in Irpin, and she just said, I'm not coming back until the war is over. I said, that means you're never coming back because the war could go on for a long time. And so Ukrainians understand quite acutely how dangerous living in Ukraine is becoming. And you know from the headlines that Russia is again massing troops at the border. I mean, they pretty much retaking Kursk, Oblast, and are massed up at the Kharkiv border and Sumy. And so I think there's going to be a summer offensive. Now, the fortunate thing is that the Russia has shown itself to be quite weak. So I don't expect, and well, based on what my reading and their history in the war and the military analysts, and how much losses they're taking, I don't expect that they're going to be able to roll over much territory in Ukraine. But they, as you know, that's really secondary. The primary aim of Putin is to destroy Ukraine and to make sure it's not an independent nation, and he keeps pursuing that with Donald Trump as his accomplice.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always kept reading about this like culmination point that the Russian army was nearing its culmination point. And I want to say that was like already like 2 years ago or something like that, where like supposedly it was going to hit that culmination point. Like Putin just seems to have shifted, the Russian economy towards the war economy, and they're mobilizing people and they're building new weapons and they're getting new weapons from their partners, the Shahed drones, the North Korean shells, and everything else. And it's just like, man, this, like I don't
I
know, like
think,
you're saying it's weak, and I'm saying like it seems like they're not as weak as people predicted that they would be at this point.
oh yeah, no, I think you're right. We've long the other illusion we've shed, or I think most of us have shed, and I really get irritated by stories saying Russia is going to collapse, anytime now. I don't see that either. I mean, they have, first of all, sanctions are this whack-a-mole thing where you're
Yeah.
always having to put on secondary, third sanctions, and as long as they have oil and gas, it's going to find a customer. So they're always going to have some amount of money. Um, and anyway, he's not, I've lived in Russia. I mean, it was a long time ago because I haven't been there, would never set foot in there again. But last time I was there is 2008. But I know he doesn't care about the general condition of the people. He has moved, he's moved to a fascist military economy, and that is the way things are going. They're brainwashing people in occupied areas. They're brainwashing their own people. It's a highly militaristic society. Some people think he's afraid because he's got a million person army, all armed to the teeth, ready to kill, and so he's got to be careful what he gives into. And apparently, if you read correctly, I mean, through all the propaganda, the nationalists want him to go further and don't want him to settle. So yeah, I don't see that. I see them as being quite ineffective, and I see Ukraine still as really playing good defense, but defense doesn't win the war. It might keep your survival as a nation and keep most of your territory intact, but as you know, Ukraine has its own problems with recruitment, with corruption, with the economy, with scaling up, even though they've improved a lot, with scaling up on defense and the big areas of technological military prowess, the drones. I mean, if you read, you see that Russia is also doing quite well in production and adapting, and things like fiber optic drones. And as you mentioned, has allies. They're not They never were really, unfortunately, isolated in the world. They still had China lurking in the background, Iran, North Korea. So they're not alone. And the way the sanctions played out, all these neighboring countries basically became pass-throughs, and people just are inventive about finding ways to evade sanctions. I still think sanctions are important for moral reasons, and they're important when they're enforced, and they're important when you have sort of a universal opinion. But as you know, it's not going very quickly.
But what do you think if, if the US stops being a partner for Ukraine in terms of supplying them in weapons, do you think that Europe will somehow fill that gap? Like, if the US just sort of like becomes a neutral party in this picture, I mean, do you think that Russia will then be able to make advances? Do you think that Europe will fill the gap so it's sort of like remains, more or less of a stalemate?
I think Europe is willing. I don't think they're capable yet, as far as I can see, and from all the evidence that we see, because they're struggling themselves. I mean, Germany is going from basically a nothing defense to trying to become the strongest army in Europe again. UK's got finance. I mean, they all have their reasons, excuses, whatever, economic issues, and so they're really not. They're not even. They're not even scaling up because really only the Baltics, maybe the Nordics, and Poland, I think are are sufficiently emboldened or sufficiently understanding the Russian threat. Kaja Kallas, the EU foreign chief, says where you stand on Russia depends on where you sit, and that is so true. But I think the bright spot here is Germany, and I think Germany can lead the rest of Europe with France, with Great Britain, to a place where they're going to have to be anyway because of the unreliability of the United States. And I think the unreliability will extend past Trump because Europe and the rest of the world understands that, okay, America has changed. And even if they haven't, we can't count on that. And that's where Europe should be anyway. I think Trump. That's one of the things that he needed to do. I don't like the way he does it, but Europe, how to get Europe to take care of its own defense, um, is something that many administrations have struggled with, I think, for decades. So that's going to happen. But I think Ukrainians need to hold off. But having lived in Ukraine, it's just very, very difficult. I mean, I just don't. If we continue, if tonight's the fourth night of the barrage and the night after is the fifth night, even the hardcore people, and most of the people who have stayed are hardcore, they're going to stay there no matter what. I think they will start to rethink their positions. And the ones who leave now are going to find it difficult because people are not as welcoming of Ukrainian refugees, certainly as they were in 2022.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. And yeah, that's for Putin. I guess one of his successes is draining the population of Ukraine from those lands by pushing them out, and a lot of those people won't come back. So, I mean, that's something I've talked about in the past here. That's a huge
In that
problem
way,
in the
in
future.
that way, he's won. I mean, that's another partial victory for him. If
Yeah.
he can destroy the economy, uh, then he's succeeded. If he keeps millions of Ukrainians from returning home, then in his brain he's succeeded because he can just repopulate the rest of it. But again, through all this, it's always never all terrible or all good. As I understand it, Ukrainians have, because of what happened to the energy grid, for instance, have really restructured the grid in a way that makes it more decentralized and resilient, or is on the way. I hope that's not just hype. We'll find out next winter. But uh, Obviously Ukrainians are succeeding um, in many weaponry areas, including air defenses, except for the ones that they need to stop the ballistic and cruise missiles. But we still don't require military service until they're 25, and Ukraine has tried to sweeten the pot, offer big signing bonuses, salaries of $3,000 a month, free education, free housing, loans, and things like that. But as I understand it from the last statistics, only 500 have taken up that offer, and that's kind of creating resentment from older soldiers who went in under less generous conditions. So I still think we have a manpower shortage that needs to be addressed. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, just, a couple conversations I've had when I was visiting some friends in Ukraine, it's that people are hesitant because they still feel that there's some corruption within the military, or inept commanders. And I mean, it's sort of like a lottery. You could get a good unit and a good commander, but you could get some guy who really doesn't value the lives of the soldiers. And then once you're in the system, you're sort of stuck in the system. They don't have a regular rotation. They don't get breaks, and then come back. They're sort of like pushed in there. And then once you're in there, yeah, you almost become a slave to that. So, I mean, that was like some of the feedback I got
You
while.
do become a slave. I mean, I don't have a lot of, I mean, I'm not a guy who knows a lot of soldiers, but I do know some. And one of them told me just this last weekend that she wants freedom. She wants out more than anything now. She's just fed
Hmm.
up. She can't get out, and neither can the other soldiers. And so and I know several guys who just left the country, obviously, because they're just not going to take a part of it. So that remains a problem for us.
Yeah, I thought getting rid of Zaluzhny was a mistake because Zaluzhny had it seemed like he had like the trust of the general population and the general population of the soldiers and respect in the West. And Sierski has more of a reputation where he cares about end results, but not so much about how he gets there.
Yeah, and he's more willing to uh, take Zelensky's line. I mean, obviously to follow Zelensky. Yeah, I think Zelensky. I agree with you. Zelensky was a truth teller, and he continues to do that. If you see that now, because he's and even though it's unpopular, he's saying, "Listen, guys, we're not going back to even the 2021 borders at this
Mm.
given the circumstances now." So people don't want to hear it. The other thing we have is we still have Trump and Zelensky just don't get along. And he saw Trump the other day, I mean, on Sunday, yesterday, saying everything that comes out of his mouth causes a problem. And so Trump, I think, generally dislikes Zelensky, but mainly Trump is corrupt and birds of a feather flock together. He really sees the worldview as closer to Putin than he does to democracies, unfortunately. And the New York Times front page today has this like Trump's worldview. It seems to be there's three great powers: U.S., China, and Russia, and it's so wrong, archaic, immoral. But I think that's the way he
Yeah.
looks at this world. I mean, just the whole tariffs thing and this idea that we're going to become manufacturers and manufacture our own iPhone. He just he just he just goes off. He takes some things that are really good ideas, like Europe needs to do more in defense. We need to control our borders. We need to uh, get better trade deals, and then just goes off the rails in very counterproductive ways.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say his view of the world with regards to tariffs is like archaic, as you said, because it's like the world doesn't work the way it did when, these examples of tariffs that he's talking about from the past, it's a globalized economy now. Like we don't want to do those jobs in America. But Yeah, that's a
And he's running the economy off the rails. This big, beautiful bill is a big and ugly bill. It's going to jack up the deficit. It's going to, continue to make inequality greater in America. And for all his big bluster about defense, actually, after inflation, the budget analysts say it doesn't really increase the defense budget. And his Star Wars 2, or this Golden Dome, there's no estimate I've read, and if you have, that it's gonna be done in 3 years for 175 billion. People are talking 20 years, 500 billion, even if that. So I'm not sure that he's reality based there either. So we have a huge problem. What I'm looking for is that the Republicans are going to pay a huge price in the midterms, and that we're going to get some kind of reset, where if the Republicans see that Trump is politically vulnerable, that the Republican Party, and they're still there, has a wing of people who want to get tough on Russia. And if the Democrats ever get their game plan together in a way that the American voters like it, then we still have a chance, I think, for Ukraine to prevail, and for things to get reset maybe a little bit with Europe and Canada and our traditional allies. I hope so.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of bring up that topic. Like there's, I mean, I think it's more than just a wing of of Republican representatives. I mean, there's I would say majority faction who would support getting tougher on Russia, and would like to support Ukraine more, and also the Democrats. So why is like everything paralyzed and riding on Trump? Like, can't they push through some legislation or become more vocal? Are the Republicans just scared to step out of line from Trump? Like what, it's supposed to be three branches of power, right?
I haven't seen much evidence that they are courageous. I think they're cowards, and I think they fear Trump's electoral success. I mean, I am in Iowa. It's a red state. It wasn't always a red state. And I have to turn on Spanish language music when I'm driving my rental car, because all the news talk stations, they're so rabidly right wing, so MAGA, so pro MAGA, so anti Democrat, that it is kind of frightening. I never thought I'd see that in my country. There's no, on some of these stations and some of these media outlets, there's no even semblance of trying to be fair or balanced, or take somebody else's, the other side's opinion in account. And this is the way America works. I'm getting back into the rhythm of the way America works. I mean, people are working their jobs, they're paying their bills. They really have, at the end of the day, they have very teeny tiny amount of time to focus on what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, the media fuels that by having, even on CNN and other, you know, national networks, very limited international coverage. So the mainstream, and now it's always there for us, who like are geopolitical junkies. We can go find it. We know where to find it. But for the mainstream of America, they're aware of Russia's war. They're vaguely, they're on Ukraine's side. They're not sure of the day-to-day developments. And anyway, Trump says bad things about Zelensky and then Putin, so they're not sure who to believe and all this stuff. So they get confused. So clear leadership is needed. I mean, it's hard to sustain media coverage over 4 years. I understand that. But that's where we are. I mean, every other, Ukraine just doesn't come up. I have to bring it up, and this is among my family and friends. I mean, they just have kind of like moved on in the debate to other things, because they're also worried about what's going on in the economy and their social security and their health care and housing costs and all this stuff. And so Ukraine is just one more thing to juggle for them.
Well, it's something further away that probably doesn't
Oh
impact
yeah.
their lives as much as you and
I,
I, who have some connection, like real connection to Ukraine.
and the flags that were there in 2022, yes, they're gone. You know that that's been written about. And what can you do? Tell people, well, you guys, the war's still going on, so you should. No, no, no. They've had it. I mean, they just don't want to tell me when it's over, kind of like
Mhm.
that.
But why do you think the media has become so far right or skewed to the right so much? Like, I mean, I feel like this is the problem in America, this division created by this, like living in these alternate realities that are defined by wherever it is you get your information from, and then that's the reality you believe in, and if it's not that reality, it's fake news, and you don't even consider a different perception of events. It just becomes like I live in the bubble that I live in, and if it's not that bubble, then like I don't accept that disruption of that reality that I'm creating for myself. Like why is that happening? Is it like is social media responsible for it? Is it, is it like the Russian thing where there's media where there's truth to some of the things, but they just spin it another way with lies? Like I don't know. What are the building blocks of it? Like why do you think this is having such an impact on American society today? Where before,
Well,
maybe like when you were growing up,
yeah.
that wasn't such a big like a debate. It wasn't so divisive. It was.
Well, yeah, that's true. And we America will have to get back to that where they talk to each other because now they're not. And I don't see anybody. I refuse to engage in debates anymore because it's just, I don't have a newspaper anymore. So it's just if I talk, it's just another person talking. It's ownership. I've always felt for a long time that the rich, not the good rich, which I consider Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and a lot of other philanthropic wealthy, but a lot of the rich right wing haters own media, control media, and are very adept at getting their message out. And I think a lot of it is to wave something shiny at the people, transgender, get them stoked up over abortion, whatever, hot button issues, to basically remove attention from the graft, the stealing, the inequalities, the massive wealth transfer to the top that is going on. And so I think that is what we have going on. I think that's behind a lot of Trump's outrageous statements. I mean, he's so many things he says outrage, suck up the media energy. And remember, there's only half as many journalists in America as there were a decade ago, probably less. So there really isn't that many to hold government people, politicians accountable at all levels. So I think he does that because he's just too busy grifting and grafting and stealing, and so he's doing things that he's been unaccountable, and nobody's been able to hold him to account. So he's just really going full throttle on that. And he got to hand it to him. I watch him speak at rallies because I'm trying to understand. Because I never really understood but he's a beautiful demagogue. I mean, if you don't know better, he sounds really good, and he's found a way to connect with people in ways that they understand and in ways that Democrats don't do to the masses. A lot of the Democrats don't do. I mean, I would say Bernie Sanders and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez are exceptions, and we have exceptions to that. But he's a masterful demagogue. I mean, I don't want to underestimate him, but I also don't think that people should be as afraid of him as it seems like the entire Congress is.
Yeah. Do you do you think that people who voted for him, I mean, maybe not people who are like really MAGA, but some of the people who swing or maybe maybe did so with hesitation, that the bubble has burst a little bit now that he's president? Like, do you think they might have some buyer's remorse? Like is there at all people
Yeah, I
who
mean,
might?
all this tariff stuff on off 50% June 1st. Okay, we'll delay it to July 9th. It's all turning people off. People will vote for their pocketbook. I mean, that's what happened. Look at when Doge was a failure. If they even press on programs that people really want, Social Security, Medicare, if unemployment goes up, if living standards go down, and that will be the thing. The economy, how the economy goes, will decide the fate of MAGA, Trump, the midterms. So, but Democrats also need to do a lot better than they did. They had it and they lost it, and they're going to keep losing until they, you know, uh, get a better message and get a better policies and get like younger leaders to take care of that. I mean, really, really, the only reason why Trump won in 2016 was because Hillary Clinton was the nominee and she was too toxic and came with too much baggage. The only reason why he won again was because Biden was just a decade too old or 5 years too old. I mean, you remember the Joe Biden who came to Ukraine all the time when he was vice president. He was sharp. He was on point. He had messages. Um, and it's too bad, but that he's so I still view MAGA as sort of an accidental movement. I mean, I don't discount the fact that he's created a true, populist popular movement, but for the weaknesses of the Democratic Party, he would never be anywhere near the Oval Office or the White House.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Um, Maybe going back to Ukraine and your time having lived in Ukraine. I mean, what kept you there? What kept you there? Like, I don't know, what did you enjoy, or being in that part of that society for so long? Why did you stay so long? Why did you stay after, the you left the Kyiv Post after the Kyiv Post dissolved? What has been keeping you there?
Well, it's a good, very good question. But I first came in 1996, and I fell in love with the Key Post right away because I was monolingual and still not fluent in Ukrainian or Russian. I did study Russian in university, but I felt the dynamic society in transition, and I really felt that Ukraine wanted to go its own way, even though I didn't fully understand the complexities of, obviously, of what was transpiring. But it was a fascinating place. And of course, when I had the opportunity to lead the newspaper, I mean, that is like a wonder drug. There's no better feeling in the world than to lead a newspaper of very, international staff filled mostly with very sharp bilingual, multilingual Ukrainians who are really determined to and working for very, underpaid. All journalists are underpaid as far as I'm concerned, but and to set the standard for independent, uh, not afraid of anybody, not afraid to take on corruption, not afraid to speak truth to power. This was just really an exciting opportunity, the best opportunity I've had, and I've been a journalist for 40 plus years, but mostly in America. But that was exciting. Now, why am I still there? Well, over time, you get. Sometimes I'm questioning that lately, but over time, you just build up ties and connections and family and friends, and it becomes home. And I just, I'm still I'm conflicted because I understand the dangers and I understand I don't have the position I had before, and I could actually do my editing job anywhere in the globe. That's kind of the way editing jobs have become. But I just really don't like the idea of being run off by Vladimir Putin, like a lot of people. And you'll find that. I mean, I know a lot of Ukrainians who just said, I don't care what they do, I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave my home. I'm not going to leave everything. And I understand that. I thought, well, that's crazy. Don't you understand? I mean, but now I understand because I'm probably one of those crazy people saying like, no, I'm not going to be run out of Ukraine because of his bombs. It may come to that. And sometimes I think, if I had to do it over again, would I have chosen Ukraine as my second country? I think so, but Spain is looking better all the time, and other safer, more predictable places. But it was Ukrainians' dynamism that attracted me, and the ability to do journalism the way I wanted to do it without any interference from the owners. And we really had, very rare episodes. At the end, it was bad, and there were a lot of people clamoring for the owner of the Kyiv Post to shut us up, which he did. Um, but by and large, we were able to practice journalism in a way we had more freedom than definitely most newspapers in America, especially if you look at what's happening to, the Washington Post under Jeff Bezos and many other publications. So we never had the money, but if you look around, you'll see Kyiv Post alumni and veterans at the Wall Street Journal, at the Financial Times, Washington Post, Reuters, all over. They're covering the war, and they started at the Kyiv Post, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that, I think the Kyiv Independent is doing a wonderful job. Kyiv Post is always going to do fine because it has the brand that we built up, the trust that we built up. And so they have to really work hard to screw up that great brand. And they also have still the son of the owner is wealthy, and so they'll always have the money, and they have some good war correspondence and some good war coverage. So Ukrainians, I think the world is getting if they want to, again, it's like you consume what you want. If you don't want to read the news about the war, and a lot of people are choosing not to, they don't. But if you really want to know what's going on in the war, you have a lot of good opportunities to find out.
Yeah, I had Jed Sundin on this show as well, like in an earlier episode. So it was
The
interesting.
first owner, the
Yeah,
founder.
yeah. It's interesting to hear. Just, that's what was exciting about Ukraine in those days was just, you're the first at doing something in this country, and it's just like it's challenging, it's exciting, it's like you're just forging new paths, and that's kind of a
Jed was a
cool.
visionary. I had the opportunity he hired me twice. I was there in the 90s, late 1999. But he set the Key Post on his course of editorial independence. And he did it not for our high journalistic idealistic reasons. He did it for business reasons. He told me many times that if we have a paper that is seen as truly independent, then our readers will trust us, the advertisers will trust us, business will be good. And I have to he's a visionary. I mean, I wish I would have thought of that idea and had it. And he started from nothing, Key Post came from nothing, became a millionaire. End of story. And there's only been 3 owners in the Key Post, and we've been blessed and they're all foreigners. Jed Sundin, American, Mohammed Zohor, a UK citizen, but from Pakistan, and Syrian Adnan Kivan. And they all believed in Ukraine, in the free press, and they defended it. And they defended us against terrible threats. And despite the fact that, Ukraine economy was never great. But we believed in it. We still believe in Ukraine. I think what's happened in the last 4 years, despite all the difficulties, gives people reason to believe that Ukraine will triumph. And actually, if you go back into Ukrainian history, Ukraine has had even worse, times, or times that are, yes, worse for sure.
Yeah, certainly, the centuries war with Russia, they've never had the backing of the world like they do now, and the army that they have now. So I think that for a lot of them, they're like, this is the moment where we need to fight on rather than leave it to the next generation.
Yes.
So what's next for you? Like personally, Brian Bonner, like where would you
Ah,
like to be, and what would you like to be
well,
doing? What are you going to be doing? Like what?
I think writing, I keep talking about a memoir, but I never sit down and discipline myself to that, or writing the great novels based on my experiences here, or in Ukraine. But I'm still kind of in semi-retirement, I guess. Still a part-time job with a cipher brief, looking for opportunities. I don't expect that I'll ever go back to that I'll be invited back to the Kyiv Post. It would take an ownership change and other people. And the other thing is, there was a time where my skills were in greater demand in Ukraine, which is uh, you know, getting journalism done the right way, with a sound set of principles and writing structure and fluency in English. But in my time, the Ukrainians became so good and so skilled, and they internalized the free press issues, and they know English, and write better than some of them write better than I do, and so there was less need for the foreigners. And now you see that with Olga Rudenko, my deputy chief editor, as the chief editor of the Kyiv Independent. So you're always going to need some native English speakers, but the gap between what it was when I first got there, was very difficult to find people who could report, write, and edit in English. And so we always had a bigger complement of expats. So, and now, even since I left the Kyiv Post in late 2021, AI has revolutionized journalism and editing and writing and researching. So that, you just every development, and they killed the print. I'm a dinosaur. There's no print edition. So, and that was what I mean, I was never gonna kill the print edition. They would have had I would have had to been dead first. But, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe that's the way life goes. Things are changing all the time. Journalism and media are dynamic. What remains, though, is that people in power don't like to be challenged, and we have to figure out the financial aspect of keeping journalists employed. Otherwise, we lost a ton of people because they just couldn't afford to live on what we were paying.
Mm.
So I think those challenges remain. But in general, I mean, I think um, we still don't know what AI, where that's going to lead the whole world in terms of warfare and journalism, economy, and so forth. So it's actually we're in the middle of another interesting revolution. It's too bad so much of the world's resources are spent on destroying each other. As you know, almost $3 trillion in defense spending last year, going up all the time. And it seems like, despite all of our technological progress, humans have not evolved, in a civilized fashion. And I don't blame everybody. I blame Vladimir Putin's of the world for this circumstance. So
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in as long. Now retirement is not the same as it was. I mean, if you still have your brain and your fluency and your ability to express your thoughts clearly, concisely, better than anybody. I mean, you have a platform that's yours. Make it what you want. I mean, in a way, that journalism has become more democratized through the podcasts and the YouTube and Substacks and all that. So there's still a lot of opportunities out there.
Interesting and crazy moment in time where we are right now. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd want to start. I'm glad for my era, but if I were a young person coming in, I don't know. Maybe I would have the energy to figure it all out. But now it does seem like changes are accelerating, and nobody really quite knows where we're headed. And I suppose people never have.
I think I remember like this was sometime after the Revolution of Dignity. I had emailed you and tried to be like, hey, because I'm a documentary filmmaker background, and I'm like, let's maybe I can do some video stuff. We can do some video stuff for the Kyiv Post, and sort of like we didn't really like run
We
with
never connected. There was an odd period. We were broke, and yet our readership was the highest ever because Mohammed Zahor is a good man. Wasn't as generous as Adnan Kivan. That was our glory days financially. And we made a mistake. I mean, we could have done that what we should have done was film the revolution. We were there. We were, we were one block on off Kreshadek, then Pushkinskaya, no longer named that, and we didn't. Missed opportunity because then somebody else did Winter on Fire. We're always hanging on. I would never say that the Kyiv Post, just like Ukraine, you can't say, "Wow, this is like we're set, we're good, Ukraine is fine." Ukraine, Kyiv Post, like Ukraine, has always struggled, and actually our struggles mirror Ukraine's in a lot of ways for survival, for financing, for um, all that. But yeah, that was a golden time. But just when you thought like, okay, that was it, triumph and revolution, then you had the war, like the very next day. I mean, I remember in the early parts of the war, we had people in Crimea, believe it or not. We had people in Crimea. We also had people in the eastern Donbass on the Russian side of the line. And we had, then people still moved freely between Russia and Ukraine. Took a long while, and you remember that Russia was Ukraine's largest trading partner until 2018, 2019, maybe a little bit 2017 at least. But so it's taking a long time, but that's gone. They've separated. I don't see that ever going back, thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Simon Ostrovsky on a couple episodes before, and it was interesting because he was there also doing the stuff with Vice News at the time in 2015 in Donbass, which, at
He
the
was doing
time,
hot stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it was sort of like, breaking the traditional mold of journalism, I guess you could say. So yeah. But he's got a new film he's working on now about evangelical Christians in Ukraine and how they're being persecuted by Russia. It's in the works.
Well, that should strike a nerve with the MAGA crowd.
Yeah, that's what he's kind of going for. That's this game. I'll send you the link to the episode. You might find it interesting. This was, 2 months ago as we spoke.
Well, I wish we could have gotten together in 2014, but we were pretty stretched back then. When the war started, we certainly weren't ready for that. I remember the early days. I mean, we didn't have any flak jackets. We had
Yeah.
nobody on the staff who'd been on the front line of a war. But we learned. They learned.
Yeah, I didn't make it out to the East really like after documenting the Maidan, but I did sue the Winter on Fire guy for using my footage. That's a different.
How did that end? How did that end, by the way? Yeah.
We settled. We settled. I sort of in the pre-trial process. He sort of dug his own hole with his lies, and we settled before it went to trial.
I've been in touch with him, but I had heard that, and we did cover that. I mean, that people were very angry because, appropriating other people's materials is a no-no. And that's still an issue we have to decide in the AI age, but it's an eternal issue, plagiarism. And
Yeah.
I hope got justice on that. Just when you thought it would settle down, there's something that
Yeah.
you could throw at you. It's either a corruption scandal or a revolution or a war or a Trump impeachment or Russia was doing something. And it's not like, you know, I think we were lulled into complacency, I think, 3 years before the full-scale invasion, because all the warning signs were there and we covered them. I'm just trying to think, like going back, should I have just put on the front page every week, Russia is going to invade, Russia is going to invade? But then we felt like we were, Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, the sky is
Yeah.
falling.
I think no one really believed that it was actually going to happen. I mean, Zelensky didn't believe it. He wasn't prepared. They had him prepared for the worst case scenario. I think, like Russia took all that territory early on, like coming through Crimea.
Yeah.
Like,
And it was foolish, obviously, to think that was just going to end there and they will be satisfied.
well, history in the making, and I'm enjoying just having these conversations with people who are somehow actively involved in Ukraine, and at this moment in time, just like it's kind of just to have this document also, I think is kind of cool and
I
interesting.
think we need, because the attention is so much, rightfully so, on what's happening now. I think there is room to step back and take a deeper look at aspects of post-independence Ukraine, the 90s, and what happened after the initial invasion to the full-scale invasion and so forth. I mean, I don't know if there's an audience for it, but I think actually, I'm a history major, not a journalism major. As a history major, I think there's a piece of that needs to be um, that hasn't been explored.
Yeah.
And the Kyiv Post is one of the few source materials in English for that era. But I'm also taking note of the many books that have been written about Ukraine since the full-scale war and how quickly they end up from being published to being discounted on the heavily for sales. Not that making money is the primary pursuit of books, but I mean it shows that the demand may be weakening. The demand may be not as strong as we think it is in the world to read about Ukraine or read books about Ukraine.
Yeah, well, there's probably an oversaturation of content and some, like when I did a film on the Orange Revolution and Revolution of Dignity. Like I mean, there's like one other, film geared towards the Western audience around that time, and those guys weren't even covering it, like on the ground. But now, like everyone's telling the story, right? Or at least the story of the war, the invasion.
If I did I'm not a military guy or a weapons guy, so I definitely would not do that part of it. I'm more into
But
what
you
we're
you can interweave your personal story, which
right.
a personal story is engaging. If you have an engaging personal story, then it's not just like reading a history book, like
Oh yeah, it's much
it
more
comes alive and people can relate to it and you have like the human aspect of it. Like that becomes like, something that has a different layer of appeal.
so that's on my to-do list. So when the obituary is written, Brian Bonner, longtime editor and author of whatever.
Yeah. Well, it was great to chat, Brian.
Thanks for having me. Wish we could have done more over the years. I mean, I look back and say I'm proud of what we did, but I know, we could have done more, but we did the best we could.
Everyone does the best they can. Yeah. I mean, time and resources are limited.
And Ukraine is doing the same. So I applaud you. Keep it up. You're in a good vantage point in Munich, and it's great that you're out there and still as passionate as you are.
Доки всі сплять, доки сонце іще не зійшло, гине вогонь, догоряє остання лампада. Де той літак, що світанком візьме на крило і понесе? Там, де небо, тепло і зорепад. Доки всі сплять, доки тиша скрипить за вікном, холод весни заповзає в кімнату над ранням. Де той вокзал, що покличе сигнальним гудком і проведе між одвічними вперше й востаннє. Доки всі сплять, доки сон обіймає рідню в світлі вогню, де ледь чутно виходиш з кімнати, сонце встає, йде назустріч наступному дню, а літаки й паротяги чекають команди рушати.